Hello film fans and welcome to this episode of the Sherlockian. Now, I thought I'd do the first part of this introduction in a really deep, gravelly voice, because for the first time on this channel, I'm going to be reviewing a National Geographic documentary where all the presenters seem to have laryngitis. Sorry. I don't know how they keep that up for the entire documentary. But anyway, as I said, I'm going to be reviewing my first ever National Geographic documentary. And you're probably thinking, great, what did you start with? Well, I decided to start with a program on Disney Plus called Shark versus Whale. And you're probably thinking, oh, great. Well, I'll switch off then. But wait a minute, because I do agree. Disney Plus has a sort of a thing for different kind of animal versus animal kind of documentaries. Some of them are frankly terrible, some of them are alright, but this one I thought was actually worth a closer look because unlike the rest, it's actually based on something quite interesting. So basically, the premise of the documentary is a marine biologist, Dr. Ryan Johnson, was doing some just ordinary drone surveillance for marine biology when he got reports that a humpback whale was in trouble. It got up caught in I think it was some fishing line, and basically it was in distress, and so he sent the drone off to try and find it. Well, he found the humpback, but he also found a great white shark attacking it. And from the way it attacked the humpback whale, he began to suspect that this wasn't just an isolated kind of chance encounter, that perhaps great white sharks attack whales more often than previously thought. Now, before you sort of think, great, this sounds like the kind of thing you get in like the Meg or Jaws, it is scientifically a fact that great white sharks eat whales more often than we used to be thought. Obviously, they feed mainly on seals, particularly at certain times of the year. But it's also been found, and if you're a fan of Blue Planet 2, you'll know this because they showed it. They also scavenge a lot on whale carcasses. And in fact, recent studies have shown that at certain times of the year, it actually makes up the majority of their diet. So the idea that sharks encounter and feed on whales isn't scientifically new. But the idea that they actually might hunt them, well, that's something a bit more. So basically, the entire program looks at the kind of the possibility of this. How often does it happen? If indeed it happens at all, or was this just a chance encounter? The shark found a whale in distress and took full advantage of it. And it's got some absolutely gorgeous shots. There was clearly a lot of time and effort taken to this documentary, unlike quite a lot of other ones when you kind of get the impression that kind of National Geographic kind of churn them out. This one really stands up to close scrutiny. So it's got these absolutely gorgeous shots of Johnson doing tests to see how great white sharks hunt exactly. Now, I'm sure this wasn't exactly new. I'm sure he'd done these tests before, but it's quite cool seeing him do them on camera nonetheless. He does these brilliant things where he tows kind of different kind of seal decoys outside Seal Island, which is that famous place where great white sharks regularly hunt each year at the seals breeding season. In fact, I've talked about it quite at length before on Planet Earth, where there gets those amazing shots of which Simon King took in slow motion of great white sharks hunting, which are absolutely gorgeous. They stand up, I think, as some of the best wildlife photography ever taken. And this, while not quite up to that same immense standard, is still pretty good. And you get some amazing shots, again, in slow motion, of the great white sharks leaping out of the water as they breach with the seal decoys in their mouths. Now, what Johnson discovers is that great white sharks are incredibly selective. They take mainly young seals for preference, and obviously this means that they are incredibly kind of, we might almost use the word strategic hunters, and therefore the idea that they, obviously they hunt purely, based on kind of coincidence is obviously a load of rubbish. They clearly are looking for particular targets. So the idea is, it was obviously attacking the whale because it saw it was weak and it knew what it was doing. Now, the best bit, I think, of the documentary is the bit after this first bit on Seal Island, where Johnson and his team basically look at great white sharks hunting in a more unusual ways. Obviously, the famous way great white sharks hunt is when they swim under the surface and they see the silhouette of the seals above, and then they come up underneath, breach, take a big bite out of them, mortally wound the seal, and then they can come and feed at their leisure because the seal's not going very far with a big chunk of flesh missing. And this is the famous kind of great white shark hunting technique. It's even featured obviously in Jaws, and on most famously, of course, on the cover of Jaws, where you see the great white shark underneath the swimmer with its mouth wide open. But they obviously use other techniques as well, and it shows this particular a different seal breeding colony where great white sharks, because of the depth, can't hunt like that, and therefore they basically hunt kind of by ambush. They swim around, and they got these amazing shots again by drone of all the seals coming out and mobbing the great white shark, coming really close to it, basically to try and drive it away. But it keeps watching, waits till one of them just for a second loses concentration, maybe dozes off, maybe it looks at something else, and then it goes bam and grabs it. But what's really amazing about this is they actually had both Johnson and the cameraman in the water with the shark. Now, it's absolutely incredible that they even deigned to do this. Obviously, great white sharks do eat people. It's not generally on purpose, but nevertheless, even in documentaries like Shark, the famous BBC One series about sharks, which is absolutely fantastic. They make a point that when they filmed the great white shark stuff, they weren't very careful. They were all in shark cages. They made sure they weren't silhouetted against the surface of the water, just to make sure the sharks didn't make any mistakes. Great white sharks don't tend to hunt people, but there's no reason to be stupid about it, or to allow the sharks to make that mistake. So the idea that somebody would actually jump in the water, as Johnson and his cameraman Barry did, is incredible, really. And the shark comes in really close. They get these amazing shots of the shark really up close up as it's feeding on the seal and kind of shaking its head back and forwards to kind of loosen the flesh and gulping it down in big chunks. And it's amazing. And clearly they were on a kind of adrenaline rush. When they come up, there's this brilliant bit, as they're normally, very capable, very charismatic scientist is really, really excited. He's just, babbling, saying how amazing it is and can they help them in quick because it's not a safe place to linger. And you see the cameraman just looking behind him, just really breathing deeply in and out, not hyperventilating, but clearly, he's had a bit of a rush, and he just makes this really laconic South African comment. He sort of says, "Well, that was something." Only he didn't say it in an Australian accent, obviously. But it is amazing that they even thought about doing this. I mean, and quite frankly, I think it was a little bit, perhaps not overconfident is the word, but a little bit, well, risky for one of a. Yeah, I think that's a very good word to use. A little bit risky, but nevertheless it worked, and it's absolutely amazing. The rest of the documentary is a little bit, I won't say duller, because it looks, and they follow kind of the humpback whales, where they're going and where might be the best places for the sharks to attack them. And it's not drab by any means. There's an amazing shot underwater where they see a whale that's actually been attacked by a group of sharks, and not great whites, but obviously, but smaller ones, following the sardine migration along the coast. And it's absolutely incredible, and clearly evidence that sharks do sometimes attack whales, if not actually hunt them. But the best bit is at the bit at the end where Johnson takes the viewer over the attack from the drone. Now, you've seen bits and pieces throughout the documentary, but he looks at it in great detail and basically shows why he was so excited and interested when he first saw it. And because it's quite clear from the way he talks about it that the shark knows what it's doing. It knows exactly where to bite the whale. First of all, it attacks the side of the base of the tail where there's a big blood vessel, because it knows that the whale's tail is its main form of defense. And with the humpback, it's virtually its only form of defense. So it makes sense to take that out first, even though it's tied up in the fishing line, to make sure it can't fight back. It then does a very similar trick to the way orcas hunt whales, and the way you see on, say, things like Frozen Planet 2, where the orcas are hunting the bowhead whales, and they try and breach over the top and force the whale into the water so it drowns. The shark is a very similar thing, but obviously on its own, and it keeps coming up and using its body weight to force this young whale underneath the water. And it does this multiple times until eventually the whale drowns. And it's quite clear from the footage that the shark knows what it's doing, and which I was quite excited by. I thought, oh yeah, I can see kind of now why you did the documentary. This is something very interesting. Obviously, they don't have any kind of concrete conclusions by the end, which perhaps is why it's only rated 5.1 out of 10. Sorry, 5.4 out of 10 on IMDb, which I was surprised at. I think it's well worth a higher rating than that. It is true they don't come to any sort of concrete conclusions, but that makes it also feel quite academic. It makes it feel like they're not, just trying to. It's not all about shock and awe and getting excited and showing things about sharks biting things. They have thought about it, but it certainly does suggest, maybe room for future research and even future documentaries. It's the kind of thing that maybe they might look into more on a bigger budget BBC documentary and see if they could actually film this actually taking place in the wild. So I was really excited by it, and I think it's very interesting. And yeah, I would totally recommend this documentary if you like sharks or marine life. It's well worth a watch. It sort of reminds me a little bit like a full-length kind of Deadly 60, a little bit more grown up maybe, but not much more. It's got the same kind of exciting, charismatic presenter and the kind of focus on big predators doing exciting things. Anyway, that was the Sherlockian. I hope you enjoyed this little sort of dip in the toe of kind of National Geographic. And you can follow me on Twitter. My link is in my Twitter handle is in the description below. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.